She had her hand on the door. Not pushing, not yet, just holding the bar with the particular grip of someone who has already decided and is waiting for their body to catch up. The restaurant was quiet behind her. One table set with 8 place settings, 8 candles, 8 water glasses still full, a birthday cake in a white box in the kitchen that nobody had asked for. Wendell had seen her sit for 2 hours. He had watched her stop checking her phone at some point around 9, the particular stillness of a person who has understood that no one is coming. He had watched her fold her napkin precisely and set it beside the plate and reach for her coat and stand. And now she was here, at the door, 40 feet from where he stood behind the pass. He had not decided anything yet. He was still deciding. Then Cece came out of the back. Some decisions are not made. They arrive. Through the door, a child opens on their way to ask if they can have a cookie, and by the time you look up, the situation has already changed. Wendell Okafor had opened Cassava 3 years ago, in a corner spot on Harwick Street that had been a dry cleaner, and before that a shoe repair, and before that, according to the landlord, a pharmacy that the neighborhood had loved. He had scraped together the capital from a decade of line cooking, the last 4 years of which he had spent as sous chef at a restaurant downtown that had a Michelin star and treated its staff in inverse proportion to its reputation. He had left the night a senior chef threw a pan, and the other sous chef laughed, which told Wendell everything about what the kitchen had decided was acceptable. He had taken the corner spot on Harwick Street and built it into something. The menu was West African influenced, not aggressively conceptual, rooted in the food his grandmother had cooked in Accra, and in what his wife Miriam had taught him about balancing a plate for someone who was coming in after a long day and needed to feel, specifically, that someone had thought about them. That had been Miriam's framing, offered one evening when he was struggling with the concept. Think about who's sitting down, not what you want to put in front of them, and it was the framing the whole restaurant ran on now, 3 years after she was gone. She had been diagnosed 11 months before Cassava opened, pancreatic, moving fast. He had almost not opened. She had told him, from the hospital bed the week after the diagnosis, that he would absolutely open, that she wanted him to open, that she did not want to be the reason a restaurant didn't exist. Miriam had taught in public school, 4th grade, the same room for 11 years, a classroom that looked like a person lived in it because a person did, in the way that mattered. She had brought things home from her students in the form of information. This one needs glasses. This one isn't eating. This one has something going on at home. She acted on the information. She kept a basket in her classroom with granola bars and hand sanitizer and pencils, and she refilled it from her own pocket, and she mentioned it to no one. Wendell had found out about the basket 2 years in, when a parent at a school event had come up to Miriam and held her hands and said something in a low voice that made Miriam nod and pat the woman's arm, and then immediately redirect the conversation. He had asked her about it afterward. She had said, "Some of the kids just need things. It's not a big deal. You're spending your own money." "It's not a big deal," she had said again, which was not the same as disagreeing with him. It was just not a big deal. She had spent the last 3 months of her life making sure that Cece would be okay. Not in the way of managing grief, she was too honest for that, but in the specific, practical sense of thinking about what Cece would need. She had written things down. Notes to Wendell, notes for later, what Cece liked for breakfast, and how she needed to hear things, and the specific way she sometimes needed to be left alone, and the specific way she needed to not be left alone, which were different situations that looked identical from the outside unless you knew. She had written Cece a letter for Cece's 18th birthday. She had made Wendell promise to give it to her. The groundnut stew had been the last thing. They had made it together in the hospital kitchen, the family lounge at the end of the ward, a hot plate and an electric skillet and ingredients Wendell had brought in a bag, because Miriam had wanted to make it together, wanted her hands on it, wanted to give him the lime part while she still could. She had added the lime while sitting in a wheelchair because standing was not reliable by then. And she had tasted it from the spoon he held and said, "Yes, that's right. The lime lifts it." He had memorized her face when she said it. He thought about her face when he made the dish now, every time. He thought about the lifting. He had put it on the menu when he opened. He served it on Tuesdays because she had been a 4th grade teacher, and Tuesdays were her hardest day, and he liked the idea that the hardest day had something in it. He had not told anyone this except Tom's, and Cece when she was old enough to ask. She had been, in most ways, the most practical person he had ever known. She had also been the person who cried at every performance Cece had ever given, school concerts, birthday magic shows. One memorable evening when Cece had performed a made-up song for 4 family members who were related by blood, and Miriam had wept openly, without apology. Cece was 8 now. She was at Cassava on Tuesday evenings because the after-school sitter had Tuesdays off and school was out, and this was one of the arrangements of a life organized around the schedule of a child and a restaurant. She did her homework at the small corner table near the service entrance and ate whatever Tom's made her, and was, by general agreement of the staff, an extraordinarily good guest. She understood that the restaurant was working around her, and she did not interfere. She had once, when she was 6, reorganized the to-go menus by color because she thought it looked better, and she had been right, and Wendell had let it stand. Tom's had been with Wendell since the opening. He was 29, and had grown up in the restaurant where his uncle had worked and had therefore learned to cook before he learned to drive, and had a palate that Wendell trusted more than his own on the dishes he had been making for so long that he could no longer taste them, objectively. He was also the person Wendell talked to, in the way you talk to someone you saw every day under conditions of heat and pressure, honestly, without the buffer of social lubrication, about the things that were actually happening. He had been the one to mention, at 8:15, that the woman at table 9 had not checked her phone in 40 minutes. "She's done," Tom said, not unkindly. "She knows they're not coming." "I know," Wendell said. "You want me to say something?" "No." Tom's looked at him. "You've decided. You just haven't admitted it." He went back to breaking down the grill station. "She ordered the lamb. She finished the burgundy. She's been at that table for an hour and a half and has not asked for the check. She doesn't want to go." Wendell looked at the pass, through which he could see Patricia Helm at the table she had reserved for 8. He thought about whether bringing out the cake was an intrusion or a recognition. "She's a CEO," Wendell said. Or she was. Patricia Helm. Tom's paused. "The restructuring one? From the articles?" "Yes," Tom's considered this. "So, she's spent 30 years making decisions about other people's lives." "Yes, and tonight she's sitting alone at a table she reserved for 8 on her birthday." "Yes." Tom set down the scraper and looked at him. "That makes it worse, not better. Right?" "Yes," Wendell said. "It does." He stood at the pass for another few minutes. Patricia had refilled her water glass herself, from the pitcher on the table, because the server had been giving her space. He watched her do it with the same economy of motion she brought to everything. No waste, no performance. Just a woman filling her own glass at a table she was sharing with no one. She had her mother's approach to people, which was not caution and was not aggression, but was a kind of open, steady attention that most adults found disarming because it was so complete. Miriam had been able to look at a person and see what was going on with them in a way that was not psychic and not manipulative, but was simply the result of actually looking, which turned out to be rarer than you would expect. Cece had this quality already, at 8. Wendell watched her teachers react to it in parent-teacher conferences, the slight pause before they answered a question, as though they were checking whether Cece was asking what she appeared to be asking or something more. She was almost always asking what she appeared to be asking. On Tuesday evenings she had a routine, homework first, at the corner table, with the focus she brought to things she had decided to finish. Then, whatever Tom's had made. Then she was at liberty, within the understanding that she was not to bother the guests, and was to stay out of the kitchen proper. She never went to the small office couch to rest, because she was never tired in the way that produced resting. She was tired in the way that made everything more interesting, which was Miriam's way of being tired, too. What she was doing tonight was what she always did after homework and dinner, moving through the restaurant the way a person moved through a room that belonged to them, which it partly did. She knew the layout and the staff and the rhythm of a Tuesday service, and she was, in the careful judgment of everyone who worked there, not a disruption, but a presence, the kind of presence that made the room feel like it had a life to it beyond the service transaction. A regular had once told Wendell that eating at Cassava felt like eating at someone's home. Wendell believed that this was significantly Cece's doing, though she would not have understood what that meant. She came through the door from the back hallway, carrying her book, something with a bird on the cover. She was doing a project, and she walked through the dining room the way she always did, with the authority of someone at home, in a place that was also a place of business. which was a balance not every child could manage. She was also, like her mother, constitutionally unable to watch a person be alone without wanting to do something about it. The woman at table 9 had been alone since 7:30. Wendell had taken her reservation himself, a party of 8. She had been brief on the phone, and he had set the table accordingly and had the cake brought in at 6. At 7, one of the servers asked if they should call. At 7:20, Wendell said to give it a few more minutes. At 7:40, the woman arrived alone. She was 67, he would have estimated, with white hair that had the quality of something formerly blonde, cut short and neat. She wore a silk blouse in a dark teal, and a good jacket, and the kind of earrings that cost money but did not advertise it. She had looked at the 8-place table, and she had said, without apparent emotion, "It seems it will just be me." And she had sat at the head of the table and ordered the lamb and a glass of the burgundy, and she had eaten with the careful attention of someone accustomed to eating alone, but who has not forgotten what it was like to do otherwise. Her name was on the reservation, P. Helm. He had watched her arrive. She had come through the door at 7:40, which was 10 minutes after the last moment when the party could have been late rather than absent, and she had paused inside the entrance and looked at the room with the assessing eye of someone who was used to walking into rooms and immediately understanding what they were dealing with. She had seen the table. She had seen the 8-place settings, and the 8 candles, and the 8 water glasses, and she had understood all of it in the 2 seconds she stood there, before the host reached her. Whatever the understanding cost her, she had paid it before she crossed the room. Wendell had been behind the pass when she arrived, and he had watched this, and he had thought, she has been here before. Not at this restaurant. At this specific situation, the moment when you understand that what you expected is not what has arrived, and you have to decide, in the next 2 seconds, who you are in that moment. She had decided quickly. She had walked to the table and sat down. She had not looked back at the door. Patricia Helm had booked the table 3 months ago. She had done it herself, which she almost never did. In 32 years, there had always been someone to make reservations, arrange logistics, confirm details. She had made this one herself because it was personal, and she had not developed a ready apparatus for personal things. She had begun her career as a junior analyst at a consulting firm in Chicago in the late 80s, at a time when being a woman in that room meant being either invisible or twice as precise as everyone around you, and she had chosen precision. She had stayed precise for 3 decades. She was known. She was called upon. She was the person you brought in when an organization was in genuine trouble and needed someone willing to make the decisions that everyone else had already decided were someone else's problem. The decisions had generally been right. The cost of the decisions had been, she understood now, other people's trust. Not their respect. She had respect in quantities she found occasionally oppressive. Trust was different. Trust was the thing that made a person call you simply to hear your voice, and she had not been called that way in longer than she could honestly account for. She had prepared the guest list for the birthday dinner the way she prepared restructuring proposals, systematically, with sourcing criteria applied. 8 people she had worked with across the years, with whom she had shared significant professional time, whom she had thought of them, as the closest thing she had to a circle. She had called each of them personally to invite them. Each had expressed warmth and confirmed. Over the following weeks, the cancellations had accumulated, each with a reason that was plausible and unverifiable, each offered with a warmth she recognized, from decades of professional experience, as the warmth of people relieving themselves of an obligation rather than people who were genuinely sorry. She had arrived at Cassava at 7:40, knowing she was coming alone. She had not cancelled the reservation because she was 67 years old, and she was going to come to her own birthday dinner, even if she was the only person at it. She had sat at the head of the table. She had ordered the lamb and the burgundy, and she had eaten with the careful attention she brought to things that were worth doing correctly. And she had refrained from looking at her phone after the first hour, because looking at her phone was a way of pretending that something might still change, and she was not going to pretend. She had been, if she was honest, clarified rather than relieved. 32 years of deciding things had not produced 8 people willing to come to her birthday dinner. That was a number that deserved to be sat with, without management or reframe. She had sat with it. He had watched her for 2 hours. Not continuously, the restaurant had other tables, other requirements, but in the way you watched something that was happening in a room you were responsible for. He watched her eat the lamb with careful attention, and he watched her speak briefly to the server, and he watched her refill her own water, and he watched her read something on her phone for a while and then put it away. He watched her look at the empty chairs. She did not look at them the way a person looks at something they're trying not to see. She looked at them directly, each in turn, the way you look at a fact you are in the process of accepting. He counted. She did this 3 times. Each time she looked for a few seconds and then looked back at her plate or her wine or the middle distance. Around 9 o'clock, one of the servers had come to the pass and said, quietly, "Should we start clearing the place settings?" Meaning the 7 that were set and unused. "Leave them," Wendell had said. The server looked at him. "She might prefer—" "Leave them," he said again. He was not sure why. Something about clearing them felt like a verdict. He thought about what the evening had been supposed to be. He thought about the 3 months of planning she had apparently put in, the calls, the confirmations, the restaurant reservation, the cake in the white box, and about what it took to do all of that and then arrive here anyway alone and order the lamb and sit at the head of the table and not make a scene and not leave. It took something. He was not certain what to call it. Dignity, maybe, or the specific kind of stubbornness that looked like dignity from the outside. He thought about Miriam, who had arrived at her own diagnosis the same way, not looking away from it, not performing optimism she didn't have, not making it a scene, just sitting with it and asking what they were going to do next. What are we going to do next was how she had framed every hard thing, as though the hard thing was a problem they were solving together, which was the only framing that had ever made the hard things survivable. He thought about a woman who had been alone at a table for 2 hours, and had not once, that he had seen, looked toward the door with hope. She had known, long before she sat down. And she had sat down anyway. Wendell had not connected the name to anything while taking the booking. He had connected it to something around 8:30, when the lamb was long cleared, and she was on her 2nd glass of Burgundy, and he was passing through the dining room and saw the monogram on her briefcase, which she had set under her chair, and the briefcase's corner showed a luggage tag with the full name, Patricia Helm, and the name hit him the way names did when they were attached to something you hadn't expected to see at a restaurant table on a Tuesday. Patricia Helm had spent 32 years restructuring companies. She was known, in the business press, as the kind of person who arrived at an organization in difficulty and made the hard decisions that other people had not been willing to make. The decisions were, by most accounts, correct. The decisions were also, by most accounts, the end of significant numbers of careers. She had been on the cover of 2 business magazines. She had been the subject of a profile in which 3 former colleagues, speaking without attribution, had described her using words that Wendell would not have repeated in front of Cece. She had also, in the same profile, been described by one named source, a former assistant, as the most professionally rigorous person they had ever worked for, and also the loneliest. He had thought about that profile for a while, standing near the pass, watching her refold the napkin. He had thought about the 8 place settings and the birthday cake in the white box, and the precision with which she had said, "It seems it will just be me," and he had thought about Miriam, and the way she had cried at every performance, and about what it meant to become, over many years, a person who lived in a way that produced exactly this kind of Tuesday evening. He had not made any decision. He was still not making a decision. And then Cece came through the door from the back hallway. She was in her school clothes still, a blue sweater, with a small stain on the sleeve from what had been earlier in the day a juice box. And she was carrying a book, and she walked through the dining room with the authority of someone who did not question her right to be there, and she was halfway to the corner table when she saw the woman at table 9. Cece stopped. She looked at the woman. She looked at the 8 place settings. She looked at the woman again with the particular attention she brought to things she was deciding how to handle. Then she walked to table 9. "Did your friends not come?" Cece asked. Wendell had started moving toward her from the pass. He was close enough to hear, but not close enough to intervene before the question landed. The woman looked at Cece. Whatever she had been expecting at this hour of this evening, it was not an 8-year-old in a blue sweater with a juice box stain on the sleeve. "They did not," the woman said. "That's not very nice of them," Cece said. "No," the woman said, after a moment. "I suppose it isn't." Cece looked at the empty chairs. She looked at the woman. She pulled out the chair immediately to the woman's left, which was set with a full place setting, water glass, folded napkin, 3 pieces of silverware, and she sat down in it. Wendell arrived at the table. "Cece, I'm sitting with her," Cece said. "She's alone." She said this the way she said most self-evident things, which was without aggression and without apology, as though she was simply clarifying a fact that the adults had somehow failed to act on. Wendell looked at the woman. The woman looked at Cece. "I don't mind," the woman said. He did not know if she meant it. He did not know if it was politeness or if it was something else. He decided to trust it for now. He looked at the table. He looked at the 8 candles. He looked at Cece, who had sat down with the naturalness of a child who has identified a problem and has addressed it without waiting for adult clearance. And he thought about what Tom's had said. She doesn't want to go. He thought about the 2 hours he had spent watching this woman manage the accumulation of an evening, watching her refuse to make it a scene, watching her refuse to leave. He thought about the precision with which she had sat at the head of a table for 8 and ordered the lamb and waited for something that was not coming. He thought about his daughter, who had just sat down next to a stranger because the stranger was alone, and the logic of it was so obvious to her that she had not paused. He thought about Miriam. He thought about the basket of granola bars and hand sanitizer and pencils, refilled from her own pocket, mentioned to no one. He thought about the school concerts and the birthday magic shows, and the one evening a 7-year-old had sung a made-up song for 4 relatives, and Miriam had wept, openly, without a trace of apology, because the song was being sung, and that was enough. He thought about what are we going to do next, which was what she had said when the diagnosis came, and which was what she had said every time. Her entire life, something hard arrived. Not what happened to us. What are we going to do next? He looked at his daughter, who had not asked him if she should sit down. She had seen what needed to be done, and she had done it, in the way Miriam had always done things, not because the situation demanded she perform compassion, but because it seemed obvious that a person needed company, and she was a person who was available to provide it. This was not, in their household, considered remarkable. It was considered the obvious thing. He did not hesitate. He pulled out the chair on the woman's right, the one on the opposite side from Cece, so that Patricia Helm was between them, and he sat down, unhurried and without apology, across from his daughter, and looked at them both, first at Cece, then at Patricia. A restaurant is the only room where a stranger sitting at your table is not an intrusion. Something about the public nature of eating makes it possible. You are already in the posture of receiving something. One more arrives. "I'm Cece," Cece said. "What's your name?" "Patricia. Are you always this dressed up on your birthday?" A pause. "How did you know it was my birthday?" Cece pointed at the white box on the service station near the wall. "That's a birthday cake box. We have them at school. They always look like that." Patricia looked at the box. She looked at Cece. Something moved in her face, not quite a smile, but its precursor. "I am, actually," she said. "I don't own any clothes for not being dressed up. My mum was like that," Cece said. "She always wore nice things, even at home." She picked up her fork and set it down again. "She died when I was 5. The table was quiet. Wendell watched Patricia receive this information, watched her not flinch from it, and not perform sympathy, and not reach for any of the responses that adults usually reached for when a child said something like that. "I'm sorry," Patricia said. Simply, plainly, it was pancreatic cancer, Cece said. "Which is very fast. My dad made a dish for her, and it's on the menu." She looked at Wendell. "Can she have some?" "It's almost 10 o'clock, Wendell said. "The kitchen's still on," Cece said. "Tom's hasn't left." Wendell looked at Tom's, who was visible through the pass, and who had in fact his jacket on and his bag over his shoulder and one foot pointed toward the door. Tom's met Wendell's eyes and took his jacket off and put his bag down without being asked. "What's the dish?" Patricia asked. "It's a groundnut stew," Wendell said. "My wife's recipe. She adapted it from my grandmother's, lighter, with lime. We serve it on Tuesdays." He paused. "It's the last thing she taught me before she died." Patricia was quiet for a moment. She looked at the table, at the 7 empty place settings, at the napkin she had refolded 3 times over the course of the evening, at Cece sitting in the chair immediately to her left with a book under her elbow and no apparent intention of going anywhere. "I'll have the groundnut stew," Patricia said. Wendell went to the pass and told Tom's. He also, while he was at the pass, sent a text to the rest of the evening staff, "We're running a little late. I'll close up. Go home." He did not know what he was doing, exactly. He knew he was not going to close the kitchen while this woman ate alone. He came back to the table with a bowl of the stew and a plate of rice and a small dish of the lime-pickled onions that were served alongside, and he set them in front of Patricia and sat back down. "Did you cook this?" Patricia asked. "Tom's made it tonight. I make it on Sundays." She took a spoonful. She ate it the way she had eaten the lamb, with full attention, actually giving it. "It's very good." "My mum invented the lime part," Cece said. "Grandma's recipe didn't have lime. My mum added it." "How do you know that?" "Dad told me. And there's a handwritten recipe card in the kitchen." She propped her chin on her hand. "Patricia is a very old-fashioned name," she said. It was not unkind. It was Cece's way of asking a question. "I was named after my grandmother," Patricia said. "She went by Pat. I never liked being called Pat." "What did your friends call you?" Cece asked, a pause that lasted a beat longer than the others. "Work colleagues. Mostly they call me Helm." She looked at the stew. "I'm not sure I have friends, precisely. I have people I know professionally." Cece absorbed this. "That's sad," she said. "Not meanly, observationally, yes," Patricia said. "I think it might be. A child naming a thing is different from an adult naming it. The adult names it to acknowledge. The child names it because the name is simply accurate, and they haven't learned yet to pretend otherwise. The woman at the table received it the way you receive a correct diagnosis, with relief and something else that takes longer to name. It was after 10 now. Wendell brought out tea, a rooibos he kept for himself, not on the menu, and they sat at the table with the 7 empty place settings around them and Cece's book open but unread in front of her. Patricia told them, in pieces, what the evening was supposed to have been: dinner for 8 colleagues. She had planned it for 3 months. The first cancellation had come 2 weeks ago. By last Thursday, there had been 3 more, and she had hoped the remaining 4 would still come. "None of them came," Cece said. "None of them came." "Did they say why?" "Scheduling conflicts," Patricia said. Variously, Cece considered this with great seriousness. "I don't think that's the real reason." "No," Patricia said. "I don't think it is either." Wendell looked at this woman, at the precision of her posture, the briefcase under the chair, the 8 candles still burning because there was nobody to blow them out, and he thought about what 32 years of being right had cost her, and whether the cost had been visible to her while she was paying it. He thought about Miriam, who had never once in their life together been in a room where she was not findable by the people who needed to find her, who had cried at performances, who had added lime. "May I ask you something?" Patricia said. "Yes," Wendell said. "Why did you sit down?" He thought about this. He thought about the true answer, which was that Cece had sat down first, and he had followed, which was also the truest answer he had about most things in the last 3 years. He thought about Miriam's framing, think about who's sitting down, and about the woman who had walked into his restaurant alone on her birthday and ordered the lamb and sat at a table for 8 and refolded her napkin and had not once in 2 hours looked around the room to see if anyone was watching her. "You were alone," he said. "People eat alone in restaurants every day." "Not on their birthday," Cece said. "That's different." Patricia looked at her. She looked at Wendell. She picked up her tea. "My daughter called this afternoon," Patricia said. "She called to wish me a happy birthday. We talk about 4 times a year." A pause. "My choice mostly. I was traveling for work. When she was young, I was making decisions. I was always making decisions." She set the cup down. "She's 38 now. She has a son I've met twice." "What's his name?" Cece asked. "Henry." "How old?" 4, Cece nodded, with the gravity of someone filing important information. "You should visit him," she said. 4 is a really good age." Patricia looked at her. There was a quality to the looking that Wendell recognized. It was the way adults looked at children when children said the thing that needed to be said in a room full of people who had been collectively avoiding it. The kind of look that was partly surprise and partly something that took longer to name. "Yes," Patricia said quietly, "I should." The candles had burned down to stubs. It was past 11. Wendell brought the birthday cake out from the kitchen, a modest thing, white frosting, the number 67 in small blue numerals, and set it on the table. We ordered it. It doesn't seem right not to bring it out. Patricia looked at the cake. He lit a candle from the service station and put it in. Cece sang Happy Birthday. She sang it the way she sang things, with complete commitment. Eyes on Patricia the whole time. It was the performance of a child who believed that singing was the point. Patricia did not cry. She sat very still and listened, and when Cece was done, she blew out the candle. She did not make a wish out loud. Whatever she made, she kept. "Thank you," she said, to the room. She left at 11:30, after cake and after a conversation about Cece's school project on migratory birds, and after Wendell had brought out 3 things from the kitchen, because she had asked what else was on the menu and asked follow-up questions with the attention of someone genuinely curious about how food worked. She tipped generously and left with the same precision with which she had arrived. At the door, she stopped. Her hand was on the bar. She turned back. "Is your restaurant open on Thursdays?" she asked. "Yes," Wendell said. She nodded once. She went out. Tom's appeared at the pass. He had stayed the whole time, nominally cleaning, actually listening. "A woman who had a birthday," Wendell said, before he could ask. Tom's looked at the table, the 8-place settings, the blown-out cake candle, the empty bowl of groundnut stew. "Does she have family here, a daughter?" "And a grandson named Henry." Cece put on her jacket and came to stand beside her father and looked at the door that Patricia had gone through. "She's going to come back on Thursday," Cece said. "You think so?" She asked if you were open. "That's not the same thing." "It's not the same thing," Cece said with the precision she had inherited from her mother, and Wendell did not have a response to that, because she was right, and he knew she was right, and that was most of what parenting a child like this came down to. Being right slightly less often than she was, and not making her feel bad about it. He locked up at midnight, he thought, walking to the car with Cece's hand in his, about the dish with Miriam's lime in it, and about what it meant to make something that fed people who needed to feel that someone had thought about them, and about a woman with a briefcase and a grandson named Henry, and 32 years of being right about the hard things, sitting at a table for 8 with nobody coming. He thought about Thursday. What we build in the years of our lives, the work and the habits and the careful management of distance, is not separate from who we end up at the table with when the evening is over and the candles are down. It is exactly what produces it. Every room you stood too far from, and every room you sat down in, accumulates. At the end, it is all the same account.